Hi guys, welcome back to the Art of Servers. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to use the JBOD commands in the storcli tool from Broadcom. Now, I'm making this specifically for the JBOD commands because I felt like that subsection of the storcli tool was not very well documented, and my search online couldn't really find any useful examples or information on how to use those JBOD commands specifically. And so I actually had to experiment a little bit to kind of iron out the kinks and understand how all the different commands worked under the JBOD I guess sub command set in the storcli tool. And so I figure I should make a video to help anybody else who might be looking for information on how to use the JBOD commands with the storcli tool. All right, so now before I get started, do me a favor and smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm so more people will benefit from this video. And if you're into building storage servers and dealing with LSI RAID controllers and stuff like that, consider subscribing to the channel. All right, so let's go ahead and get into this. All right, so I have a Broadcom 9560-16i controller in this machine that I'm currently logged into that you see on the screen. And these commands apply specifically to the 9400 series, the 9500 series, and the 9600 series. These controllers, when you get the ones that are specifically RAID controllers, but you want to use them as a JBOD controller or an HBA-like controller, you can actually change what's called the personality of the controller to one of those modes. Let's kind of show you what I have here. So the way to run the storcli command, the first thing I want to show you actually is how to get the help page. All right, and that's really simple. You simply run -help with the command storcli64, and you'll see it shows you all the different options in the kind of command line format of the tool. But of course, there are so many options. It scrolls right by my screen, and you're obviously not going to be able to read more than half of this stuff. So you can actually append an option called page dash, let's see, I think I have 35 lines here. And if you do that, then it's going to show you the 35 lines at a time. So you can hit continue or hit any key to continue to the next page and to see more of the output from the help, the -help option. So this way you can kind of scroll through all the different options, and as you can see, there are pages and pages and pages of this stuff. But today's video specifically is going to focus on the JBOD command sets. All right, so let me first show you guys how to run the storcli just to kind of look at the controller. And so you do /C for the controller and followed by a number, which is the index number of the controller. In my case, I only got one controller in there, so it's going to be 0. If you have more than one controller, then you have to figure out which number it is. All right, so I'm going to do a show all. And of course, again, this is just going to scroll by with a whole bunch of information. Let me add the page option here again. All right, so here you can see that I have a model Mega RAID 9560-16i, 8 GB. This is the model of the controller. It is a native RAID controller. And let's go ahead and scroll to the very bottom. Okay, and at the very bottom here under PD list, which is the physical drives list, you can see that I have 4 drives connected here, and these are NVMe drives. So the 9400 series, 9500, 9600 series have what's called tri-mode firmware, and that means that they support both SAS and SATA as traditional HBAs or SAS HBAs do, but they also support the tri as in the NVMe drives as well. So in this case, I have 4 NVMe drives connected to this controller. All right, so let me show you first of all this whole thing about the personality that I was just spoke about earlier. So I'm going to run the same command, storcli64/C0 show personality. All right, so you'll see on the output here under current personality, it says it's currently in RAID mode, and this is the default mode for these RAID controllers. Now underneath that, you'll see supported personalities JBOD. So now that probably should say JBOD, RAID because it supports both personalities. But I think the way this output is showing it, it's basically showing the alternative personality that's not currently active. And so you can see that this also supports JBOD mode. All right. Now, I do want to point out something. I think in the 9400 series, well, let me just kind of show you this. Let's go back to the help page. And I'm just going to grep out for personality to show you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so you can see that the command for changing the personality has three options. It has RAID, HBA, and JBOD mode. All right, so there's these three different personalities, the HBA and JBOD. You'll notice in my case, it simply says JBOD. Okay, if I try to use the HBA personality, it's not going to work. Okay, I think that only applies to the earlier 9400 series. I kind of recall them referencing it as HBA personality instead of JBOD personality. So I'm not exactly sure what the difference is between HBA and JBOD personalities. To me, they kind of more or less mean the same thing. But in order to execute this command successfully, you need to know what personalities are supported. So in my case, it supports JBOD mode. If I try to use the HBA personality, it's going to fail, and so I have to use the JBOD mode. If you do a show personality on your controller and it says HBA, then I suggest that you use the HBA personality instead of JBOD. Okay, all right. So the way to change this card's current configuration, which is in RAID personality, to the JBOD personality, is to run this command, set personality equal JBOD. All right, so it successfully executed that change, but it's telling me that I need to reboot this machine in order for it to take effect. So I'm going to go ahead and reboot this machine, and we'll come back once it's booted up. All right, guys, I'm going to log back into the server. It's booted back up. Escalate to root, and let's go ahead and check on that personality. All right, so you'll see that the current personality now is JBOD and the supported personalities is RAID. So it's basically just swap places. So now we have successfully converted the RAID controller into its JBOD personality. It basically will be able to allow drives to be presented directly to the operating system like an HBA controller. Okay, so let me show you the drives again that are connected to this controller. And you will see under PD list here, you will see these 4 drives listed here. Now it's really important for you to make note of what's called the enclosure ID and the slot number. Okay, so you'll see here on the very left column, there's EID : SLT. Okay, and so the numbers in front of each line item here for the drives is basically the enclosure ID : the slot number. And this is how you're going to address each of those individual drives when you're trying to configure them, for various things or whatever. I will mention that when I first got a hold of this controller, it had an older firmware version. And for whatever reason, I think it was like the first 2 drives, like the 0 drive and the 1 drive, had the same enclosure ID and slot number. And so it was really challenging to address those drives individually because they basically had the same number. And I don't really know why that was. It just was that way. But once I updated the firmware to the latest version, that didn't happen anymore. So if you happen to see that and you're running into that challenge, consider looking for a firmware update and applying that. And it'll save you a lot of hassle because I had spent a lot of time trying to work around the quirkiness of that at the time. But since the firmware update, that problem has gone away. Okay, so each of these drives can be addressed by its enclosure ID and its slot number. And if you are, this is for NVMe drives. Obviously, if you are using SAS or SATA drives or stuff like that, it might be a little bit different. If you don't have, see, these drives are behind what's called a virtual enclosure device. Basically, the LSI controller emulates as if there is a virtual enclosure, and then behind that it has all the NVMe drives connected to it. That's how it operates in tri mode or the NVMe mode. If you are connecting SAS or SATA devices, it's not going to go through that virtual enclosure unless you actually have some sort of SAS expander enclosure or something like that. Okay, so it might show up a little bit differently. You might not have an enclosure ID. You might just have a slot number. Okay, all right. So how do we address each of these drives? So let me kind of show you how that's done. Storcli C0 for the controller, the reference controller. Since we have an enclosure here, and that enclosure ID up here, as you saw, is 252. So we're going to do /E252 for the enclosure number slash, let's say I want to look at this top drive here that has slot number 4. So I'm going to say /S4. All right. And if I do a show all there, let me clear the screen. You can see that it's going to show me all the information about that particular drive. All right. So there's quite a bit of information here that's giving me, it's giving me drive temperature, which is, I guess, good to know. I've got the drive serial number, model number, capacity, size, speed, all that stuff. And of course, it's using 4 lanes because this is, again, NVMe drive. So it's using 4 PCI lanes. And yeah, so anyway, that's how you get the drive information for each one of those drives. Okay, but remember, this is in JBOD mode. So each of these drives can be presented directly to the operating system. But if you run LSCSI right now, you'll see that I don't have anything other than the Samsung NVMe drive, which is the boot drive for this machine. And it shows a Broadcom enclosure, Broadcom Virtual SES enclosure. Okay, so that's that virtual enclosure that's on the card that, kind of is like the front to all the NVMe stuff. So you're noticing that none of the drives that I just showed you are actually showing up in the operating system. Right, they have to be configured. Each of those drives need to be configured in JBOD mode in order for it to show up. So how do you do that? All right, so you can do that by, let's say let's work on that same drive that we were just looking at earlier. So we're going to reference the drive by /C0/E252/S4. And we're going to run the set JBOD command. All right, so now it says status success. And at this point, if we do, let's do a show on that. Okay, so for this specific drive, you'll notice that some of this information has now changed. So in particular, the state used to be unconfigured good, or UGood, which stands for unconfigured good. It basically means the drive is ready for you to configure it, but it hasn't been configured. Right now, instead of UGood, it says online. Okay, so it means that it's available. And over here on the very right side, under the type column, it says it's in JBOD mode. Okay, so now if I do LSCSI, you'll notice that I have an NVMe drive, that Intel drive, showing up as dev SDA. Okay, so that's how you turn those drives, or those unconfigured good drives, into JBOD drives that are directly presented to the operating system. All right, now one thing to note, remember these are NVMe drives, and normally if you had the NVMe drive attached directly to your PCI bus, they would show up like the Samsung drive right now, which is on the motherboard's M.2 slot, and it would present itself to the OS as /dev/NVMe. Probably the Intel one would have been NVMe 1 N1 or something like that, but it's not. So when these NVMe drives are presented through this RAID controller's virtual enclosure, they show up as dev SDA like they would a SAS or SATA drive. Okay, so that's one kind of caveat that you want to be aware of when you're using these NVMe drives through these Broadcom tri-mode controllers. Okay, all right, so I have 3 more drives, right? Like I saw earlier. Okay, you see that under PD list physical drives, I actually have 3 other drives that are still in the unconfigured good, and there's nothing under type, and so these remain unconfigured. Okay, and so I could manually execute the same command I did on that first drive on these other 3 to do the rest of them. You can certainly do that, but I want to also show you guys another way. All right, so remember back when we were looking at personality, there was something here that I didn't talk about earlier. I want to point out right now. You'll notice these 2 lines under here. It says behavior mode, none, and then it says supported auto-configure behaviors are none and JBOD. Okay, so what is behavior mode? Behavior mode is basically what does the controller do when it sees a unconfigured good drive? What is the default behavior to handle that? And when it's none, it basically says I'm not doing anything until you tell me what to do. All right, so you have to run all the commands that I showed you earlier on, set JBOD and all that stuff to configure it and make it into a JBOD drive. If you wanted to just automatically do that anyway, because you want to use this controller as a JBOD and any drive you attach to it, you're definitely going to want it configured as a JBOD and you just want that as the default behavior, you can set that. You can change the behavior mode to JBOD mode, and then anytime it sees a unconfigured good drive attached, it's going to automatically enable JBOD mode on it. Okay, so that is a very convenient way to kind of save yourself a few steps. So for the remaining 3 drives, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn on the behavior mode to JBOD, and it's going to automatically see those 3 drives that are unconfigured good and turn them into JBOD mode. Okay, so this is how you do that. Set auto config JBOD. All right, so auto config is JBOD. Let's take a peek at the personality page again and make sure that that's the case. You can see behavior mode is now JBOD. All right, so now let's take a look at those remaining 3 drives that we were looking at earlier. All right, so you'll see now that those other 3 drives are online state and type JBOD. Okay, just like I said. So, and then if you scroll up here, actually, you're going to see your JBOD list, and these are all the drives that are presented directly to the OS through this JBOD mode. All right, so you can see that I have all 4 drives online through the NVMe interface and all that stuff. And then, of course, if we run lscsi, we're going to see all 4 drives now. And as mentioned earlier, they're going to show up as normal SAS or SATA drives with this SD kind of naming scheme. So we have SDB, SDC, SDD for the remaining 3 drives. So all 4 NVMe drives are now presented directly to the OS. All right, so how do you get rid of this stuff? Like, let's say you're done with this setup and you want to unconfigure it and maybe go back to RAID mode or something like that. So I'm also going to show you guys how to delete the JBOD. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to do this, so I want to kind of go through this one step at a time. So let's say, again, controller 0, so /C0, and I want to unconfigure that first drive, which is Enclosure ID 252 slot 4. So I can reference it as E252/S4, okay? And I can basically run this delete command, JBOD, okay? So this is basically addressing the physical drive itself directly by the enclosure number and slot number and telling it to delete the JBOD configuration off that drive. So now if I do that, let's go back and look at lscsi. You'll notice one of the drives has disappeared. That was the SDA drive, has now disappeared. And if I want to look at all the drives, you can see under the JBOD list, that drive that we just deleted the JBOD configuration from is no longer available under the JBOD list. But if you look down here in the PD list, that drive is still connected, it's just not configured. Okay, so it's in the unconfigured good state, and under type, there's nothing. Okay, so that's how you can manually delete one of the JBOD drives, basically, or unconfigure it, basically. Okay, now I want to show you another way to do that, because there's actually multiple ways to do this. That way was basically addressing that specific drive via its enclosure ID and slot number, but you can also reference these using what's called the JBOD ID. Okay, so if you look under the JBOD list, each one of these drives on the very left here has an ID number. So this first one here is number 6, this is number 8, and this is number 10. Okay, and if you want to address it by its JBOD number, you can do so. So this is how you do that. storcli /C0 for the controller, and then /JBOD, and then you give it its number. And so earlier, let's say we're gonna remove this number 6. Okay, so we can have /C0/JBOD6, and that's going to address the JBOD with ID number 6. Okay, and if we want to actually just remove the JBOD configuration, like revert that drive back to its unconfigured state, we do delete. Okay, so this command is a little bit different than the previous one where we had to say delete JBOD. This assumes that that's what you're doing, so you don't actually have to append the word JBOD at the end. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and delete JBOD succeeded. All right, so now if I go again, look at the list of drives, you can see that JBOD ID 6 drive is now gone. And of course down here you can notice that it is also now in the unconfigured good state, and the type JBOD is gone. Okay, I want to show you another way to do the same thing. Okay, so with the storcli commands, anytime you have an index number to reference, say like a controller or enclosure or slot number or JBOD number, okay, you could also use the keyword all, which means just do everything, right? Everything that's available. All right, so in our case, let's say we want to do /C0/JBOD, but I'm going to do all. I want to basically say delete the last 2 remaining JBOD drives and just get rid of them. So I don't have to do them individually. I can basically use this all keyword, and it will just basically apply that same command to all the drives under that specific reference. All right, so I just do delete here and do that. Okay. And now if I do a show all, you can see under PD list, all of my drives are still there, but they're now in the unconfigured good state. Okay, so they're ready to be used, but they're not configured right now. And you'll notice that there's no longer a JBOD list because I've deleted all of them. Okay, and if you do lscsi, of course, all those drives are now gone. All right, so that's how you use the JBOD command set. There's multiple ways to address those JBODs, and that's where I kind of found the documentation a little bit lacking, and I want to share that with you guys in case anybody else is looking to use one of their Broadcom RAID controllers in JBOD mode. Hopefully you found this very useful. All right, one last thing. Let's change the personality default behavior back to the none. So show personality. Okay, so you'll notice that it's still in that JBOD mode. So in this mode, if I reboot the machine right now, because those drives are unconfigured, it's going to see, oh, unconfigured drives. My default behavior is JBOD, so I'm going to convert them to JBOD. So it's going to automatically make those drives available in JBOD mode. And maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I want to switch back. So you got to make sure to change the behavior mode back. So I'm going to do set auto config to none. And that was a status success. Okay. And now if I do show personality, you'll see that the behavior mode is now back to none. All right, and of course if I want to change the personality back to a RAID controller, I simply do personality equals RAID, and then of course we have to reboot in order to make that take effect. But if I do show now, you'll notice that current personality is still JBOD until we do the reboot, but the requested personality is RAID, and so once it reboots, that's going to take effect. All right, guys, so hopefully you guys find that helpful. If you like this video, make sure to give me that thumbs up. And if you're into this sort of stuff, consider subscribing to my channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss my videos. Also, if you want to support my channel, go check out my eBay store. I'll leave a link down in the video description. I have the greatest selection of pre-flash, ready-to-go IT mode HBA SAS controllers for your ZFS, Unraid, or TrueNAS builds. All right, so go check out the link down in the video description below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye.